In the dust-choked outskirts of Jupiter's third Lagrange point, where derelict freighters outnumbered stars in the sky, there stood a junkyard-turned garage owned by a solitary mechanic named Lita Vorn, who had long since stopped caring about galactic politics, fame, or the slow decay of empires. She cared only about keeping her wrench from rusting, her bots from wandering, and her solitude from breaking. But one quiet cycle ago, that changed when a rust-covered ship limped into her airspace. With engines sputtering and a distress beacon chirping like a dying bird, its pilot barely conscious and the vessel an amalgam of centuries-old tech held together by prayers and stubbornness, and as Lita floated out in her pressurized suit, she figured it was just another stranded drifter trying to patch up enough to make it to the next black market station, nothing unusual, until the airlock hissed open and a man, no, a boy, really, stumbled out and collapsed in her arms, whispering with cracked lips, "Please don't report me," and something in his voice wasn't desperation, it was terror, and against every instinct she'd built surviving on the edge of lawful space, she hauled him inside, rehydrated him, treated his radiation burns, and began work on his ship, which was a nightmare of fused wires, cannibalized parts, and makeshift navigation systems. So bad, in fact, that even her AI assistant, Click, asked if this was some kind of prank, but Lita didn't laugh, because she saw something familiar in the ship's internal wiring: survival over style, resilience over regulation, and someone who had been on the run for a very long time, and over the next 3 days she toiled, rewiring fuel lines, patching hull fractures with salvaged Xenosteel, and upgrading the ship's power relay with a quantum core she'd stolen during a skirmish over Saturn's rings 10 years back, and through it all, the boy, Jaren, he said his name was, watched her with wide, unsure eyes, never asking why she was helping, never offering money, and she never asked for any because deep down, she remembered a time when she too had crash-landed with nothing but a heartbeat and someone had fixed her ship without a word, and when she finally sealed the last bolt, and he climbed into the pilot's seat, she simply nodded and said, "Fly safe," and he paused, as if trying to say something meaningful, but all he could manage was, "Thank you," before taking off into the dark like a shadow escaping its source, and for a time, that was that. Until 3 weeks later, just after Lita had finished rigging an old mining rig into a plasma drill, her proximity sensors screamed, and when she looked up, a cruiser loomed over her garage, not just any cruiser, but a T-class Obsidian-class flagship of the Galactic Crown bearing the unmistakable insignia of the Regent's elite fleet, ships that weren't supposed to be in fringe systems, ships that only came when they wanted something, or someone, dead or silenced, and before Lita could retreat, her comms lit up with a direct channel override, and a voice, crisp and cold, echoed through her deck. "Lita Vorn, remain where you are," and for the first time in years, she felt her hand tremble over her plasma cutter, but she didn't move, not even as the cruiser deployed a dropship that landed with the precision of a blade, and out marched 24 soldiers in black exosuits and visors that reflected nothing but menace, and between them walked a tall, silver-haired man, with insignias that marked him as Commander Halrex, a name that carried weight in whispers and nightmares, and he approached her with the calm of someone who'd ended wars with a nod and burned cities with a shrug, and he said, "You recently performed repairs on a vessel known as the Wind's Hard," and though she kept her face stone still, her heart skipped, because that was Jaren's ship's name. He'd said it once, almost under his breath, but Lita, ever the survivor, replied, "I fix a lot of ships." "Commander, you'll need to be more specific," and he stepped closer, eyes like frozen plasma, and said, "The pilot of that ship was not just a fugitive. He was the last living heir to the Galactic Crown," and the silence that followed was so heavy it cracked the air, because Lita realized she hadn't helped a drifter, she had helped a prince, the most hunted being in the galaxy, and the most dangerous if reclaimed by his family, because the crown had fallen to internal war after the massacre of the royal family 15 years ago, and if Jaren survived, he could unite the factions, end the bloodlines that had spilled across systems, and possibly bring an end to the crown itself. And here she was, the mechanic who had given him the wings to fly again, and Commander Halrex added, "We believe he intends to resurrect the rebellion. We are here to ensure that doesn't happen," and though Lita said nothing, her mind raced, and she realized that she could betray Jaren and probably live, maybe even be rewarded, or she could do nothing, and die, but something inside her snapped, maybe the same something that had led her to fix the boy's ship in the first place, the part of her that hated tyrants, that had bled in asteroid wars. that had watched friends die while emperors toasted their victories from moons away, and she smiled. Just a little, and said, "Check my registry. You'll find no wins hard logged," and the commander frowned, signaling one of his officers, who connected to her garage systems, and click, loyal click, rewrote data on the fly, rerouted logs, and presented a clean record of nothing but old repair tickets and garbage salvage, and Halrex knew she was lying, but without proof, even the Crown's elite couldn't act, not publicly, not yet, and he narrowed his eyes and said, "If you see him again, Lita Vorn, you won't have this chance to lie." And with that he turned, and his soldiers marched back, leaving a silence heavier than any explosion, and as the cruiser disappeared into the void, Lita let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, and that night, as stars blinked cold and distant, her scanner pinged, just once, a tight beam signal encrypted with an old rebel code, carrying just one line, "I made it. Thanks to you," and she stared at it for a long moment before erasing the message and shutting down the terminal, because she knew eyes were still watching, but inside, something warm flickered, not hope, she'd long given up on that, but satisfaction, because sometimes you fix a ship, and sometimes you restart a revolution, and the difference is just a choice not to charge for your work.